conversation today is about the rise of mis and disinformation on social media, and we're going to talk about how it affects the media, and we're also going to try to imagine what we can do, like how the media can deal with this, on social media, and also what is the responsibility of the media and the public. All right. So I'll just give a little bit of an introduction before I introduce my very excellent panel. The rise of mis and disinformation and fake news in Africa is a growing concern. We know this. We saw this during the elections where everybody was their own returning officer. As long as you have an account and you have access to IBC, you become a presiding officer. We saw this. And the problem with mis and disinformation is that it undermines the credibility of the media, and it also affects public opinion. So with the increasing use of technology, it means that mis and disinformation spreads more faster right now. So it's not to say that this is a new problem, it's just because we all know misinformation. We know that we were being told if you scratch your left palm, you get money, if you scratch your right palm, you lose money or something. That is misinformation. That is not as bad as it is right now, obviously because of the social media. And also how technology has advanced. So in this panel, we're going to discuss what mis and disinformation looks like on social media, how it affects the media, and the lessons learned by tackling mis and disinformation. And we will also explore ways in which the media and the content creators can navigate mis and disinformation. I've already set expectations. I hope we're good. And I also encourage public participation. There's someone who has done civic education before. And so how we are going to do this, we will have the conversation, and then after that I will open the floor for questions. All right? We're good? Please do this. We're good. I can see you looking at it. Okay, thank you. So I have an excellent panel, like I said, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, and we're going to start on my left. So from my immediate left, yes.
My name is Alphonse Yundu. I'm a journalist. I've worked in journalism for about 16 years now. And I run a project called Africa Check in Kenya. So Africa Check is a fact-checking organization. We are in 4 countries, in South Africa, in Nigeria, Senegal, and Kenya. And we work on misinformation, disinformation, fact-checking, media literacy, and everything else about that. So thank you very much. I will be happy to share with you once more.
Hi everyone, I hope I'm switched on my mic. My name is Lori Wainaina. I'm the managing editor of the PESA Check. So PESA Check also works with mis and disinformation in Africa. We are in, sorry, there's a bit of feedback, but we're in 15 African countries. Please don't ask me to list them because I will forget 1 or 2. So what we do is we focus on different social issues around misinformation as well as climate. So we do have a specific team that works purely on climate change, misinformation, and climate denial type of content. So PESA Check, and I can see some of the pioneer PESA Check people in the audience, was initially started in Kenya to look at misinformation coming from public figures and the figures they state. So when a politician X comes and says there's 97 million in treasury, PESA Check would then come in and do fact checking on that. But as Wanjiru has said, it's been shifting, and what started as something that would happen offline or at events is now being shared out online by different people, different individuals actually creating this content, whether maliciously or sharing it unknowingly, sent as received. So what we've then been doing is evolving with the misinformation and keeping track of what's happening. So PESA Check is incubated by a larger organization known as Code for Africa, and Code for Africa also has other tools and other programs that deal with the misinformation project, including the ILAB team that then goes out and finds out who are the actors behind the misinformation and the disinformation. In a nutshell, that's a small portion of what we do, and I will hand over to the next person to do an introduction of themselves.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nkira Tekome, and I work with Luminate, and we are a philanthropic organization. And like my colleague said in the previous session, we have a tendency to be brief. So I'll try and be as brief as possible, keeping in the theme. So Luminate is based here in Kenya, in Nairobi. We work in two primary areas. We work around civic participation and dissent, and we also work around strengthening healthy information ecosystems. Luminate is one of the few funders that have been funding work in media, making media more accurate, more representative, more diverse, to reflect the stories that people are looking to see and reflect the populations who are listening and looking for information. So I think, like everybody else here, they do amazing work, and I'm so happy to be part of this fund. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. My name is Odanga Malum. I am currently the senior researcher for global elections at the Mozilla Foundation, and I mostly specialize in looking into how technology platforms are turning the world to crap. And that, I could literally put it in a nutshell. That's what I do. So a lot of the work that I do centers around researching the type of harms that tech platforms either have brought forth that didn't exist before, or how they, in essence, tend to make them worse, and just looking into the entire corporate mechanism that are American and Chinese technology giants and their impacts across different countries across the world. So that, in a nutshell, is what I do.
Right, thank you very much. So I'm just going to go straight into it. And I'll start with you, Alphonse. How does mis and disinformation look like on social media? And seeing that it is on social media, and we know how social media makes things viral. So how do media houses compete with the need to be hot, like the need to be accurate, and also the speed at which information is flowing from social media to the newsrooms onto the offline platforms?
Thank you, Adil. It's a very compound question that you put across, and what we have learned from the work that we've been doing for the last 10 years at Africa Check is that the misinformation online has just jumped. Has just jumped from offline to online. There is a very tiny difference in the way that jump has affected how we process information. And the first thing that we have realized is the speed at which it is spread. The next thing we have realized is the sophistication. So previously, people would send chain emails. You remember those emails sent to 10 people and then you'll be good? Yeah, and right now, it has moved to a situation where somebody can create whatever they can create, dump it on TikTok, and as Madam will tell you, I would have like 6 people on TikTok who subscribe to my account, but 500,000 would see the content. And like that scale is phenomenal. So that's also one of the differences that we've seen. Now, for journalism and the danger that we see for that journalism where we are and where misinformation exists, is fact-checking as a standalone thing is really a response to gaps within the journalism sector. And we can talk from morning to evening about all the gaps that made fact-checking to come out of the newsroom, but we need to take it back to the newsroom. It's not fair to the audiences that we deal with to keep fact-checking as a standalone, because journalists and many journalists coming out of journalism school, they start looking at fact-checking as a different kind of journalism, but it's very niche. And if journalists do not have the skills to do fact-checking by themselves, then that is a problem. And I think that's where people like Fumua, Pesachek, and Odanga, the kind of research that you guys do should inform even the academy on how to structure journalism education to make it possible for us. And the last thing about that we need to, I'll just say this last thing. The last thing that I need to highlight is people think that misinformation on social media, you need to have some kind of sophistication for you to create it, or you need to be tech savvy for you to put it out. What we have learned is that sometimes you don't need all those tech-savvy skills. As long as you can think and tell a good story, you will put out whatever kind of false information you want to put out. So An example, the Kenyan president, former president, retired. September 13th, September 14th, somebody takes a picture of a house with a pool, lawn, a tennis lawn, like a very posh house, dumps it on the internet and says, retirement home of President Uhuru Kenyatta. That thing is removed from WhatsApp, it's removed from Twitter, put on WhatsApp, dumped on Facebook. It goes round. And everyone is wondering, how could this house have been built in Masai Mara? And all of us, nobody had an inkling about where this guy is going to settle. So it's just a person who knows. People would want to know, like it's a journalistic mind. People would want to know, where is this guy going? What is he going to do after he leaves the presidency? And so the moment he puts it there, the virality goes on. Yes, there is the sophistication that comes with things like deepfakes, but that's not our worry right now. It's how people think and how they exploit the gaps in your knowledge to weaponize the little information you know, or the gaps in your knowledge to make sure that they mislead you.
Yes. All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alphonse. And I think I'll just clarify that misinformation is where someone spreads false information unknowingly. All right, and then disinformation is where you spread false information knowingly. You actually create it, spread it. So the difference is the intention. One, there's an intention to be seen, and the other, there's no intention to be seen. Now, just to ride on what you talked about on social media, I would really love for you I'd like to ask you, to what extent are social media platforms accountable to the spread of misinformation campaigns in Africa? And also, how does that affect the media when the platforms themselves, have some sort of responsibility? And then how does that affect the media? Because when we're having these conversations, many times we have them from a personal responsibility on the user, but then there are larger platforms and larger conversations.
Yeah. So I think the extent to which they are accountable for the information that spreads on their platforms, I think they've got a very large part to play in terms of what we see within the ecosystem. Because I just want to take us back to the days following the elections, and we were all returning officers. I don't know if anyone was doing tallying in their own WhatsApp groups. But there was something that I discovered that was very interesting. I don't know how many people were getting the advice that they should probably just not log on to any platforms at that time. That's because one thing people were realizing is that the primary cause of the anxiety that they were getting was not necessarily was not anyone else's fault, but the phones that they kept on logging into, right? And the kind of information that people were getting there seemed to be a bit problematic, so much so that we actually had public health specialists coming out and saying, this is how you deal with election anxiety. Because I feel like media houses, and that's actually one of the things that media maybe had to respond to, that there was this very interesting condition that had been caused within the country because of the state of the information environment, as based on the role that technology platforms played within that information environment. Not to say that mainstream media also did not have a role to play in the confusion that is there. And I think just to think about it from the broader context, had Kenya been a very different country from what it is right now, who knows where we would have ended up. Brazil saw where those things would go. Okay? In terms of the accountability of tech platforms, when it comes to what I like to call just problematic information, right? Because you've got mis and disinformation. But what about information that is within a gray area, right? Information that is neither true or false. Malinformation, which is why I think the biggest danger and the biggest problem when it comes to the current information environment that we have is, and one of the things that we realize is that, yes, disinformation existed before tech platforms came into existence. But the way in which tech platforms have enabled the spread of dangerous information across the world has essentially turned it into a different animal with different types of consequences as we're seeing across different countries, such as the US and Brazil, even in the Philippines, where the president literally managed to rewrite history. Yeah. And even in Kenya, where we are seeing, where we would see that there were very clear effects of misinformation within the populace, where you've got people standing on the roofs of buildings because they think that COVID is coming to get them. You've got lemon selling out because people thought that you could save them from COVID, and a whole bunch of other harms. So the range of harms that are being caused by misinformation right now are very different than from what they were, purely because of the existence of what we call algorithmically enabled misinformation.
Thank you very much for that. And speaking to you, Tess, with the work that you've done in funding all of us, and working to build a healthy information ecosystem. In Latin America and the UK and even here in Africa, what are some of the lessons that you've learned, with regards to building this healthy ecosystem, knowing that there is, tech platforms, there's media, there's all of these things going on. What lessons have you learned?
Thank you so much for that. So we started funding work around countering misinformation in 2014, and our primary entry route was fact-checking. And we worked with organizations in the UK, for fact, in Latin America, Czechia. And it was the primary form, which is claiming and talking about basically, countering claims. And that was the in thing then. And I remember watching on CNN when Donald Trump was, in the election period, and there was a lot of misinformation that he was spreading on the campaign trail. And CNN had fact-check.org people coming on, and they were, fact-checking each and every one of his claims in real time. And they were doing it on the spot, and there was a team of hundreds of researchers doing that. And we were very proud of our work at that time. But things have changed. And we moved on to supporting work in Africa through Africa Check, and we moved on increasing our support to Full Fact, and also doubling down on our support to Check. But we learned that fact-checking and the speed at which information are moving are not congruent. They're not moving at the same pace, and I think Alphonse touched on that. I have a stat here that I said, fact-checkers are outspent by campaigns 100 to 1. So for every $100 that a campaign is spending, a political campaign or a misinformation campaign, there's only $1 spent on fact-checking. And fact-checking is an expensive, exhaustive exercise. So we need to be smarter about how we spend our philanthropic dollars, because we are working with a finite resource. Sometimes we cannot go up against the large resources that some of these campaigns have against them. So we're beginning to take a different approach. And fact-checking organizations are too. In conversations with them and the research that they've done and that we've done collaboratively, my colleague mentioned earlier an infection report, is talking about how we can level up from fact-checking. How can we hold leaders accountable? How can we collaborate across the space so that we are not responding to, but rather being proactive? There's lots of research on ways to empower, enable, give users more information and more power. And we're beginning to see that it's a multi-level approach. It's not just on the backs of Africa Check and PESA Check and Fact Check to carry us and make sure that online spaces are safe. And for people like Odanga to call out platforms when they're not being accountable and they're not holding power to account and they're not operating with integrity. It's for all of us to do so. So there's multiple layers to addressing this problem. And when I spoke earlier, I said that one of the things we do is on working to develop and build a healthy information ecosystem. And I think having that multi-layered approach is exactly where we need to be to have that healthy information ecosystem.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So just to follow up on what you just said, it's important that some level of responsibility is taken by the mainstream media. And so I'd like to ask you, Doreen, when it comes to the experience you have as a journalist and also the health which, as Alphonse has said, is also journalism. And I don't know why sometimes we look at it like it's a different thing, like the journalism and it's fact checkers. What do you think it will take, for the media to rebuild its credibility, to rebuild its public trust, to make sure that when we turn on, the TV for news or when we look at social media, we can actually trust the media, that we're not being misinformed on all forms, including social media. So what does the media need to start doing, or what does it need to build, to restore that public trust?
Okay, thank you for that one, Joe. I'll start with a couple of examples. BBC in South Africa published a story that a woman in Victoria had 10 babies at the same time, which was a viral story. I'm sure all of you saw it. I don't know if any of you saw the retraction and the public apology for sharing false news. The woman hadn't had the babies didn't exist. The hospital was like, what are you talking about? We've never had anything of the sort. And this is the BBC. That's one form of misinformation that the media actively plays a role in. And I'm not talking about political alternative info. This is the media publisher. This is the BBC. They have stringent processes. In Kenya, I'll pick one specific example. I'm not saying that Kenya is bad, but it's all over. But in Kenya, this was the media amplifying misinformation. One of the MPs stood up and said 20,000 Kenyans have applied for the diversity visa, also known as the green card. And it was followed with Nikubaya, Hivi, as in, is it this bad? And media houses picked that and splashed it all over. Fact was, that 9,000, I think, Amos has worked out, but about 9,000 Africans, not Kenyans, the whole of Africa had applied. And there was less than 20,000 slots for diversity across the world. But the media picked this statement from a politician and published as is, provided no context, no additional information, and no clarification that this is not possible. So in each turn, they picked information and published as is, and it was misinformation. So that's a role media explained as a conduit to misinformation. So while he's writing a fake story altogether about 10 babies, and the other one is picking a politician's statement and publishing it as fact in the publication, and people trust the media. So when I read it on The Nation, why would I question it? The Nation is the truth, say, every slogan is the truth or something of the sort. So that's what happens when we have misinformation. And media has to be accountable for such type of content. We have regulation, we have rules. During the election, when everyone had different tallies, the media council had to come out and put a statement, or media houses need to collaborate so that we have proper figures so it's not divisive. But if that comes up in such situations, why not even more simple things like somebody saying this 20,000 Kenyans are trying to get out of Kenya. So that's the type of examples that we do see when it comes to media actively being part of misinformation. But how do we fix this? There's competition. As we're seated here, Eric has probably tweeted, taken photos and tweeted misinformation panel. The Nation still has to write an article, or the Citizen has to write an article, go through 6 editors before it's published, and that takes a while. And the media is competing with that. So in the need for speed, we end up having errors being put onto the information. But I think what needs to be done is the media needs to be very clear and categorical about their processes, because you cannot compete. We don't compete with misinformation. As Shulu said, by the time I come out with a fact check, I have to call the source. So I have to call the American embassy to confirm that indeed were there 20,000 Kenyans. The Americans have to confirm with the US directly, is it 20,000 Kenyans? They then give you figures, and this trickle back effect takes what, 2 to 5 days? By that time, the misinfo has gone around the world and back and gone 5 times. And that's the problem we have. So when it comes to this issue, I think what we need to be very aware of as media is that we need to come up with a system that doesn't fully rely on fact checking. And that's why we have pre-banking and trainings and education. I'll give another example of a situation where, now that was misinformation, we have disinformation and malinformation. Just before the elections happened, there was a Jacaranda Gardens rally. And we had 2 parties claiming that they would be at Jacaranda Gardens. And there was a lot, if you followed the news, for about 2 weeks before the rally, there was a lot of conversation about who's going to be at the rally. And guess what happened on the day of the rally? The 2 parties met, there was violence. If you follow, if you monitor the trend, the conversation on Twitter, the conversation on the news, the headlines, I'm the one who's going to be at Jacaranda Gardens, I'm going to be at Jacaranda Gardens. The eventuality was that there was actual violence. And this is part of the disinformation campaign, where you have people actually spreading specific narratives before an event, during an event, to cause chaos, to cause crisis. And when you have that, the media actively play their role by, he said, politician A has said, politician B has said, politician X has said. But what we need to do is evaluate what content are we putting out. Are we looking at why the day fuel prices are going up? You're being told 7 people are, I think, what was it, sexual partners of Kenyans? That's in Kenya. You know, it's a distraction tactic, and it's part of the malinformation, disinformation campaigns, and media is being used to, and it's not limited to Kenya. Same thing happens in South Africa. You know, before a trial or after a trial, somebody will come out and make an outlandish statement, and the next thing you know, there's crisis. And this is all campaigns that are, because misinformation, they've moved. It's beyond send this to 10 people and you'll be killed. It's beyond that. There's more to it. With, as you know, said, with the sophistication, there's more to it that's happening, there's more that's coming around when it comes to this, yes, and mal, and we can't separate them all. So I would say the best way to come at it is, one, you have to be pre-guarding. So you have to monitor with every headline you share what's happening. You know, how is it leading to, how is public perception, what's happening in the country when we do 6 headlines about who's going to be at a specific rally. We need to end up in a clash. You know, when somebody says they're going to be at, for instance, but 3 parties are all claiming ownership, what happens next? If you look at Nigeria, the same thing is happening, and a narrative is now being pushed in Nigeria about the Islamization of the state or the Fulanization of the state, and this is because, you know, there are some candidates who are actually Muslim. And this type of misinfo is shared on, you know, your media houses. Not on a negative perspective. I don't assume that the news is trying to push an agenda, but they're pushing political agenda by just regurgitating what's coming out of politicians' mouth. We were having a conversation yesterday about watching news. News is very depressing of late. It's a car accident, politician has done this, corruption this, and it's across the world. It's the same content we're seeing in Africa. The first 10 items on your news bulletin are either people have died, money has been stolen, a politician has done something, or a politician has been quoted saying something about another politician, and that's all the content there is, which means consumers are no longer interested in that content. And you have to keep chasing more and more salacious headlines. Children has worked in the media, I've worked in the media, and I remember the headline has to catch the audience. And you're competing with, hi guys, welcome to my channel. You're competing for the same space because it's no longer news and entertainment. It's now news for entertainment. I have bundles. I have my 5 GB. Am I going to spend it watching my favorite YouTuber pushing, you know, the latest alcohol in the market? Or am I going to spend it watching depressing news on politicians and the most salacious headlines? So that kind of competition means we need to pre-pass. We need to evaluate our market. When we push out content, what are people reading? What is the after effect? What is listening or sharing propaganda from politician A or B or C? How is that resulting in you know, the crisis in the countries? Whether it's during elections, whether it's during the Tigray crisis that happened recently, all this conversation, how is it resulting or what is leading to what? Because a lot of propaganda is shared, and some of propaganda cannot be fact-checked. Because when I say I think person X is lying, I've already qualified, I think. So it's been qualified, it's not a fact. So what am I fact-checking? But if I say person X is lying, I have to produce evidence. When I say I think, you know, allegedly, the real allegedly smells as security. It's alleged, I've qualified it, so I can't fact check that. So we need to also be aware of such nuances within the entire ecosystem. So how we do it is, I run PesaCheck, and PesaCheck fact checks. So we are at the end, misinformation has already been shared, we've already received it on WhatsApp. I will debunk it. But there's somebody else who's actually looking at who's being paid. In the Francophone countries, we've had the French versus the Russians. Money has been poured, misinformation is being funded. We have entire systems that are being funded by foreign entities to push the agenda. So what do? We go find out who is paying who, what's being pushed. Is it influencers that are being used? Because that's also something that people take for granted, that in the media ecosystem, we now have a branch of influencers and content creators. They are being paid by disinformation actors to push big agendas. And is the media aware of that? Are we following up on that? Are we tracing back, where is this information originating? Why is it being shared? where is long-form journalism going? Are we being critical or investigative of the type of content that's being shared out? We have fact checkers being attacked globally, and organizations being shut down left, right, center. And it's not just in Africa. We have Cambodia, we went through something of the sort, the Philippines, and the rest. So how are we then integrating critical thinking in our conversation with media? How are we integrating critical thinking and analysis before we push out politician X has said Kenyans are trying to run away? All right. Andrew, look at me, but it's already stop there.
No, thank you so much, Doreen. Thank you for giving us the context. I like when you mentioned welcome to my channel, because many times we're having the conversations about misinformation. There is a very critical role that content creators play because their content is very engaging and very viral. So I just want to ask you, Odanga, when it comes to platform accountability, because it's important to hold platforms accountable, because misinformation, especially in the online space, and what I've learned from you is that it is an editorial choice. What is trending is always an editorial choice. So if something is trending, it is deliberate. If something is meant to make you feel a certain type of way, it is deliberate. And so my question to you would be, what is the media's role in holding this other media accountable? And also, we could also explore what that responsibility looks like even for content creators, the people who are actually, part of the virality of this thing with the help of social media platforms. So what does that accountability look like?
So I think how the media can hold tech giants accountable is largely by sticking true to what its principles are about. It's largely sticking true to the idea that journalism is about holding power to account. Now, one of the things I think I had a conversation with someone with that I tried to paint to them the picture of how powerful and how deep the corporate interests of tech companies are. Okay, I'm very glad by that. Is this festival funded by any tech companies? I don't think so. But that's just how far their tentacles have gone, right? I will be very open about this. A lot of the fact-checking initiatives that we have are funded by tech companies. Okay, and that does put into a lot of question about the terms of what can be. I mean, the companies do dictate what the fact checkers can and cannot fact check, which is very true. And again, this comes back to the idea of which is a real problem.
We need to add context.
And this brings about again another very real problem, even within media, about the length to which corporate interests tend to interfere with the journalism process, right? We have heard stories about how the big green company sometimes has had beef with some of our media houses because of stories that have been done. And so we really do need to think about how far these type of interests are going, because across the world these things are very prevalent. Okay, who is the biggest lobbyist in DC, in the States? It's fact checks. It's Facebook. It's Google. They're the biggest. Who is the biggest lobbying group in Brussels? Again, it's the tech giants. They outspend tobacco. They outspend the automotive industry. They outspend big oil. Right? So why do you think they're actually sending all that money to politicians? Why would Facebook employ Britain's former deputy prime minister to be its head of global affairs? Okay? Those are very, very serious questions that we have to deal with when it comes to talking about this thing. A lot of the tech companies forged their identities during the Arab Spring of 2011. They ended up positioning themselves as the champions of freedom, right? And taking on these very liberal ideologies and identities. But in reality, we've now come to see them for what they really are. Okay? They're basically conflict profiteers. That is what they are. Okay? They make money from war. They make money from people getting harmed, from harms. Okay? And the truth is, in terms of when it comes to journalism, the role of journalists is to really investigate these entities for what they are, which are corrupt corporate companies. Okay? And when you begin to dig in, you begin to see a lot of very, very weird things. Who knew that TikTok has a God mode? So TikTok has something called a God mode, which brand or an influencer or something, TikTok like to tell us that, the algorithm is out of our control. We can't do anything about it. Yet it turns out that they actually have something called a heating function that allows them to turn anything within the platform to go viral. Okay? And they use this whenever they're trying to quote an influencer on their platform or whatever. Forbes did a brilliant story about it. Please go ahead and read about it. Now, the thing about it was, what was funny was when they discovered that employees within the company were using it to give their girlfriends by value. But that just shows you the kind of power that these guys have now and how corruptible it is. Okay? So it's very important for us to think about that kind of thing. And let's keep in mind that that is now where the job of journalists come. There has begun an emerging field that looks into investigating at what a lot of these companies do. What are their interests? What is their negligence? And how do ultimately do we hold these companies to account? So that's why I think the media has a very strong role to play in terms of trying to see how do we exactly hold this kind of very new, and we're not even wrestling, we're not only beginning to wrestle with the kind of power that these things bring. So I think that's how we can go about it.
Yeah, I like that he ended it on, I think that's how we should go about it, because it was looking very dark there. It went pretty dark there for a minute, so thank you for that. I just want to ask you, Doreen, we are asking media to hold these platforms accountable, but who holds media accountable when it comes to the spreading misinformation?
I say there's a legal framework. So if you operate in what we quote unquote call traditional media, and this includes digital media, not social media, you are held to a certain set of rules. So we have your Journalism Act, your Code of Conduct, we have accountable journalism. So there are laws in place. When the Star published an article that company X was linked to a corruption scandal, they were taken to court for libel, a few million shillings was paid out to the company for defamation. So we do have laws in place for this. But we also have citizens to hold people accountable. So here's the thing. When I, as Doreen, write an article and it's a lie, same platform that it was shared on, you go and say, hey, at Doreen, why are you lying? Hold me accountable, because if we are not holding them accountable, if we are not holding tech platforms accountable, who is going to hold them accountable? And it's not a case or a situation of transference of, people say it's a case of transference of accountability. It's that if you don't speak out, nobody will. And if nobody speaks out, the problem keeps festering and festering and festering. So, Odanga says that we are at the beck and call of tech companies. So first we have to clarify that. Yes, we do partner with tech platforms to fact check. However, we maintain our editorial independence. But how do we do that? It's very difficult to do that if you operate in a system where Meta or TikTok tomorrow wake up and say, no more money for you. So we have a system, we have a network called the International Fact Checking Network that then oversees everything that we do. There is an entire code of principles, there's an entire code of conduct. And if you see a fact check that you think Shun or Doreen has done that's very geared to pro Facebook, you literally go and complain and put in all the details. And the IFCN will review, and once they find you're culpable, they will fine us. And similarly, we have the same thing that happens in different countries depending on how independent the media is, that allows people to have reporting mechanisms. So whether you're in Ethiopia, you go to the Ethiopia Media Broadcasting Association, I think that's what it's called, and tell them, we think publication X is doing this incorrectly. In Kenya, I think it's a requirement by law for every media house to have the number to the report line, where you can report any fake story or any information you feel goes against whatever standards that it is that have been set. So we do have laws, we do have legislation in place to hold journalists accountable. But I think the same needs to expand to social media. Because as a content creator, I'm also generating content for the same audience that a newspaper is. But who's holding me accountable? What are the laws that are applicable to me? So probably that's something that we need to start looking into. Over and beyond, I operate on YouTube, which is not registered in Kenya, so they're not held accountable by any Kenyan law. Ergo, meaning my content is also not held accountable by any Kenyan law. We need to figure out systems in place. For instance, those in the EU, where any content you post on any social platform, the social media platform is liable for that content, and they can be fined. So I think that's something that needs to be lobbied and transferred locally.
I like that you mentioned the legal, the legal framework around misinformation, and I think we're having a conversation with Project, and we're talking about the balance between, having like a legal mechanism in place to sort of tackle misinformation, and then at the same time, there's also the responsibility to protect the freedom of expression. So now, in your work, in your advocacy work, in building this healthy information system, how do we get to that balance where we are saying we are tackling misinformation, at the same time we are also protecting your right of expression, because we know governments that will come in and say we are going to arrest you because of disinformation, while in real sense we just don't want any dissenting opinion. So what does that balance look like, the tackling of this and the right of expression?
Thank you so much for that question, Majiro. I think what we stand to do, and why I sit here and why I do the work I do, it's guided by the public interest. Everything that is done within the space has to serve the public in a way that is meaningful and additive to their lives. Yesterday, when Maria Saluni Sahai was speaking, she used a term called lawfare. And that's where the law is used as a weapon for those who dare to speak truth to power. And it's happening to our neighbors in Tanzania. And it's moved next level. We are now, even in Kenya, we have the Cyber Crimes and Misinformation Act as well, and also for our neighbors in Uganda. I'm qualifying this, I'm not a lawyer, I just research on this space and work in this space. But there's two sides to that story. So I was reading up on, in Uganda, this disinformation law that they have has actually been used to protect people. So there was a story going around about how you can buy land and make so much money from land, and all this. Turns out to be a hoax. The people who were spreading that story were actually fined in jail. I wonder if that can happen in Kenya for all the land schemes we have going on Instagram. But anyway, that's a story for another day. But on the flip side, you have that law being used to really harass people who hold power to account. But then the issue of public interest comes in. Who is this law serving at that instance? When it's targeting, people who have been conned, people whose resources have been taken, people whose livelihoods have been washed before their eyes, that is definitely in the public interest. But it's that one journalist, that one storyteller, that one person who dared to ask a question that someone was uncomfortable against and ended up having been jailed or having extreme violence against them and their families. That's not in the public interest. So that's how we look at it. And to support situations like that, there's this term for SLAP lawsuits, which is strategic lawsuits, blah, 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 it has a long term. And we work to support journalists, and we are time, I know. So we have, in this space, I'll just talk about how we support funds to take care of journalists. And this is a way to show people who dare speak truth to power that there is hope, there is a lifeline. You can't keep doing what you're doing. There are networks of defenders in Africa and across the world who are here to support you, and we're supporting them because we need you to keep holding power to account and speaking truth to power.
Thank you very much. Just the last question, the last point of discussion, and I wanted to, to direct this to our forms. When it comes to media literacy, because you see, once you know, there's a phrase I like saying, once you know something, you cannot unknow it. So, so what role does media literacy play, when we are talking about reducing misinformation, and what does this media literacy do it? And could it possibly be like the next thing that we need to be thinking about collectively when tackling misinformation?
Yes, in the earlier discussion, I will say this quickly, in the earlier discussion from all the colleagues seated here, what I got, or the thing that they would say is that fighting false information is a whole, there's no single bullet, there's no one answer to it. And when we speak about debunking, it's about making people understand the facts, the accuracy of whatever phenomena you are discussing, whatever topic, whatever public important topic we're talking about. On media literacy, it's about understanding even how the platforms operate, the faces behind the platforms, the motives, and whatever the black box of the platform, how it works. For fact checkers, it's about making people understand, okay, this is how you process this information. And this is why it is false, and this is why it is accurate. It's about giving people the building blocks towards what an accurate narrative looks like, and what narrative that has been fudged looks like, so that they can tell, okay, this argument is missing A, B, C, or they can ask the uncomfortable questions that nobody is willing to ask. And as we think about media literacy, there's something Doreen mentioned, and I just want to add about by the time false information is going, by the time fact checkers are sitting on it, you guys have probably seen it. And so we do something that adds value to the journalism or to the fact checking that we do. We have a whole department that does what we call corrections. So it's not the most popular department by the people we deal with. So once we realize that politician A or public figure B has made a false claim, we reach out to them and we say, you made a false claim on this. This is the evidence that you are wrong. Would you mind correcting it? So some of them correct, and we've had successes in the past regime where these statements were corrected. And there are those who, just like Trump, they decide, I have 1 million followers online. You cannot tell me I'm gonna continue. And they double down with that. So it is one of those strategies that we think, educate the people to know that this person is wrong, but he wants to use his clout. Number two, the polarizing language. As fact checkers, we try not to speak in extremes. We try to be level-headed, we try to be boring, in a sense. But the way politicians speak, they want to be incendiary, they want to light the fires, they want to appeal to the passions, to the emotions. So that is one of the things that we have to do. And as I wind up, the last thing we try to do to counter that is to collaborate with people who speak the language of the masses. So Madam Speaker was here, she's just walked out. But we deal with content creators to help us communicate to the audiences about serious stuff in a way that audiences can relate to without turning it into misinformation. And we've experimented on it, thanks Teote for the billions. Yes. But we have experimented with it, we try to perfect it. It works sometimes, but at other times it might not work due to the heuristics associated with the kind of content they are creating. So it's a whole lot of experiment doing that. And then there is the collaboration between the tech platforms. Yes, we work with them in the sense that we understand they have the tools, and sometimes they give us the tools. So example, I would say, when you talk about Google, for example, they have a way of amplifying fact checks in the search results so that correct information is widely available. And if you're a fact checker, that's a tool that you can then apply. So it's not all doom and gloom, but we have to be cognizant, and it's that transparency that Odanga is demanding, where if this is what you're doing, say it and let everybody know that, hey, this is what we are doing, it's funded by so and so. And that transparency is what protects fact checking from taking shortcuts. So we're very transparent about our methodology, transparent about who we are and what we do, and the sources of our information.
Thank you very much. I don't know, we really don't have to, we have run out of a lot of time. I don't know if we have 5 minutes to, wow, okay. So we only have 5 minutes, so please allow me to only take 2 questions. I saw your hand and your hand, I'm so sorry, but yes, it starts, yes please.
Hi, my question is more of a statement. Okay, it's a question. Don't you think that media literacy is also rather dangerous when it comes to misinformation? Because the more knowledgeable you are, the more you have a certain impact on the public, and as you have the knowledge of media, you know how to formulate the information and apply it to the people, and the more the recipient of that information believe to be knowledgeable, the more they will believe whatever you're saying because they align with your thinking and they want to believe it. And even though they have the capability to fact check and to inform other people, they will just follow what you're saying because you are as educated as they are.
Okay, hi, my name is Walter Gano. I'm a student at GSIU. And my question is really simple, basically. How can fact checking be introduced in school classes or universities? And are there any campaigns or initiatives that can help to deal with this whole concept of misinformation and disinformation? Because as journalism skills, in the future, journalists, so how can we get these skills early on so that the time comes for us to be people of meaning to society, we're able to inform people correctly.
Thank you. Okay. That's just brief answers to your two questions. First answer to you is that you make a valid point, and we worry about it a lot in the sense that we teach people how to detect misinformation and how to stop it. And doing this, we use open source tools. Now, when people understand these tools and they are broke, they become guys who can be quickly recruited by misinformation campaigns to generate, because they understand what a piece of false information is. They understand the logic that false information appeals to, and then they understand the things about how to seed things online, how to distribute online, how to target those people online. So we always worry about people turning to the dark side after you teach them the skills. And it's a risk you have to take. You have to teach people, and pray that from the goodness of their heart, they will use that information the way you intended them to use. So that's one of the things. About the question that you asked about schools, I'll mention again, for the last 3 years we do run programs for schools targeting learners. So for the last 3 years we were funded by the United Nations Democracy Fund to do school programs in 3 countries that we operate in, and we were going to high schools. And aside from that, we do lectures in different universities. So we have a course that we teach at some of the universities. USIU, which last taught in 2019 by its sort of master's level. So it's usually work in progress, and we can work on that. But it's something we are like to undertake. Thank you.
You have something to only.
Yeah, I'll just respond to the media literacy aspect. It's very important for us when we think about this new state of being that we're in to just relate it to a lot of the things that already exist. So when roads now start becoming a part of our civilization and people are given cars, we have to teach them how to drive. Okay? Regardless of whether they get into accidents or not, we still have to teach them how to drive and what the principles of safe driving are. We're now in an age where we now have information highways, right? And so what I'm realizing is that I actually used to be against media literacy, by the way, because I thought it was, I thought it was entirely up to the platforms to be, but then I learned that, wait a minute, there's also a level of personal responsibility here, in the sense that as a society, we do also need to teach people how to use these information highways. Because the problem is that when you give a child a phone, especially when you think about the framing around kids, okay? When you give a child a phone, right, it's an incredibly dangerous thing to give a child a phone if you do not teach them how to use it, right? And you can see the danger of the absence of media literacy when you think about it in that very acute aspect. Okay? So for the sake of safety and how to safely use an information highway, media literacy is something that we need to begin introducing at even the lowest levels of school. You know, in primary school, when they teach you when you're going to a road, look left, look right, look left again, and cross. And in Kenya, you should do it like 3 times because people drive on the opposite side of the road. Things fall from the sky and everything. Now, we actually need to have that as a compulsory part of our own curriculum. So that's what I say we need to think about when it comes to media literacy. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I hate that this has come to an end so fast. When the bands come up that way, like the time now is up completely. I had made a statement and I wanted you to tell me whether or not it was mis or misinformation. Do you remember the statement? What was the statement? So is it true? Is it false? I haven't to give you a rate just leave it. So is it true or is it not true? Yeah? How many not true? Not true. Can you marathon in the room as we speak?
In the room?
In the room right now.
But it's true, but I'm not saying it.
No. Is it true or is it not true?
Do we have
a marathon, a record-breaking marathoner in the room? Yes or no?
No.
The question has changed. I said the time, I gave information, I crafted this dream. So how many for true? Hands up. How many for not true? Not true? Oh, there's a marathoner in the room. What, I'm sorry?
Can you fact check?
The time.
And I didn't break
I record, but the time when I said
You said breakfast breaking.
So are you seeing why we need
Maybe the information.
Are you seeing why we need media